She said, "I do" to a broken millionaire, not knowing he was hiding his power. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. Rain was falling against the wide hospital windows, blurring the city lights into streaks of silver and gold. The sound of the heart monitor filled the quiet room, a slow, steady rhythm that almost matched her own heartbeat. Clara Hale, a young nurse with tired eyes and a calm voice, adjusted the blanket over her patient's chest. She had worked 3 double shifts in a row. Her hands were trembling slightly, but she smiled anyway. Caring was her instinct. It was all she knew. The man on the bed was not an ordinary patient. His name was Evan Cole, once the youngest medical tech millionaire in the city, now a man reduced to silence and scars. The accident that had nearly killed him had also shattered his company and reputation. The tabloids called him the fallen genius. But here, under the pale hospital lights, he just looked human. Clara checked his vitals, wrote quick notes on her clipboard, and tried not to think about her mother waiting for dialysis in another ward. The bills were suffocating. Every hour she worked felt like fighting gravity with bare hands. Then, suddenly, his voice broke the silence. It was deep but rough, like someone who had not spoken for days. "Miss Hale," he said, his eyes half open, "I need your help. Something different." She froze, startled to hear him awake. "Mr. Cole? You are not supposed to talk yet. Let me call Dr. Harris's." "No," he interrupted weakly, shaking his head. "I do not need a doctor. I need a wife." Clara blinked, sure she had misheard him. "Excuse me?" He turned his head slowly, meeting her eyes. Even in his fragile state, there was a sharpness there, a kind of buried fire. "I am serious," he whispered. "Marry me just for a few months, in name only." The pen slipped from her hand, clattering on the floor. "You are delirious. You have no idea what you are saying." Evan gave a faint smile, one corner of his mouth lifting. "I know exactly what I am saying. My company's board is trying to strip me of everything. If they believe I have recovered and remarried, they cannot declare me incompetent. I need someone I can trust. You have been by my side for weeks, and you never once tried to use my name." She shook her head, completely lost. "Why me? I am just a nurse. There must be someone else." "There is no one else," he said simply. "You would be doing me a favor. In return, I can pay your mother's medical bills. All of them." The room fell silent again. The rain grew heavier, tapping against the glass like 1,000 tiny clocks counting her hesitation. Her heart pounded in her ears. She had spent her whole life doing what was right, following rules, believing honesty was enough. But this was different. This was survival, his and hers. Clara looked down at the pale man before her, the broken millionaire who had just offered her a deal that could save her family and destroy her peace at the same time. Finally, she whispered, "You are asking me to marry a stranger." Evan's voice softened. "I am asking you to give me a chance to stand again." She exhaled, long and shaky. Outside, thunder rolled. Somewhere deep inside her chest, something shifted: fear, pity, curiosity, or maybe fate itself. And with one trembling nod, the nurse who had sworn to heal others just agreed to change her own life forever. The next morning, sunlight pushed through the blinds of the private hospital suite, spilling across the polished floor. Clara Hale stood by the window, staring at the skyline as if it could give her answers. The words from last night kept echoing in her head. "Marry me, just for a few months." It had sounded insane, but his eyes had not wavered. There had been no arrogance in his tone, only quiet desperation. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the look on Evan Cole's face, not as a millionaire, not as a headline, but as a man cornered by his own world. Now, with the morning shift about to start, she tried to push it away, telling herself it was just exhaustion. She had not agreed to anything. Not yet. A soft knock pulled her out of her thoughts. When she turned, she froze. Evan was sitting up in bed, a hospital gown still around his shoulders, but his eyes were clear and alert. There was color on his face again, and a calm determination that made him look completely different from the broken man of last night. "Good morning, Miss Hale," he said quietly. His voice was steadier, though still raspy. "I hope you do not think I was delusional." Clara folded her arms. "You asked your nurse to marry you? I think I am allowed to wonder." He nodded slowly. Fair. But I meant it. I do not have time to explain everything here. My attorney will be here this afternoon. If you are willing to listen, not agree, just listen, I would appreciate that. Her heart pounded. You really are serious? Deadly serious. He smiled faintly. No pun intended. Clara sighed, rubbing her forehead. This is absurd. Absurd is what my life has become, he replied, but it is also the only way I can keep control of what I built. Shy. She wanted to leave, to hand over his care to another nurse, but she stayed. Something about his calm sincerity rooted her to the floor. Against all logic, she nodded once. I will listen. That evening, the attorney arrived, a middle-aged man in a gray suit who introduced himself as Mr. Lawson. He carried a slim leather folder and spoke with the precision of someone who had handled too many secrets. Clara sat across from him, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Evan spoke first. Miss Hale has been my attending nurse for several weeks. She has seen me at my weakest, and she never tried to sell a story or exploit me. That is why I trust her. Mr. Lawson opened the folder, revealing several neatly printed pages. This is a temporary marriage agreement, effective for 90 days. You will be legally recognized as Mrs. Clara Cole for that duration. At the end, both parties may annul the contract quietly. In return, Mr. Cole will transfer funds sufficient to cover your mother's ongoing medical care and all related expenses. Clara stared at the papers, every line of text blurring into one long, impossible sentence. You are actually doing this, she whispered. Evan leaned forward. Clara, I will not lie to you. This is business. My board wants to declare me incompetent and seize my shares while I recover. A stable marriage will prove I am capable of making personal and legal decisions. I need time, just time to expose what they did. And you think marrying me will fix that? I think it will buy me the window I need, he said. You would be my legal partner, nothing more. You would not be asked to do anything unethical. Just appear with me when necessary and sign where required. You will always have a choice. Her breath trembled. 90 days. Her mother's life. The rent she could not pay. The student loans. All the pieces of a world she was trying to hold together by herself. She looked down at the papers again. The ink gleamed under the light, and her reflection in the glass table looked foreign, like someone she had not met before. Why me? She asked softly. Evan hesitated, then said, Because you look at me like a person, not a headline. Because you still see something worth saving. The room fell quiet. The ticking of the clock grew louder with every second that passed. Clara's fingers brushed against the pen Mr. Lawson had set beside the contract. She lifted it, turned it once, and then set it back down. I need time to think, she said firmly. Of course, Evan replied. You have until tomorrow. After that, the board meets. If they win, I lose everything, including the ability to pay for your mother's treatment. He did not say it as a threat. It was simply the truth, heavy and cold. Clara stood, her mind spinning, and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused and looked back at him. You are asking me to risk everything I have ever believed in, she said. Evan's eyes softened. I am asking you to help me prove that belief still matters. Clara left the room with her heart pounding so hard it hurt. Out in the corridor, the fluorescent lights seemed too bright, the air too thin. For the first time in years, she did not know if she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life, or the one that would finally set her free. By the next morning, the hospital felt quieter than usual, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Clara Hale walked down the corridor clutching a paper cup of lukewarm coffee. She had spent most of the night staring at the ceiling of her tiny apartment, replaying every word Evan Cole had said. Marry me. 90 days. Nothing more. It sounded insane, yet every logical reason she found to refuse kept crashing into one single truth: her mother's life depended on money she did not have. When she stepped into his suite, Evan was awake, dressed in a simple gray sweater instead of a hospital gown. He looked pale but composed, as if he had already made peace with whatever would happen next. He looked up. Miss Hale, she swallowed hard. It is Clara, and I have made my decision. His eyes met hers, searching. Then say it. Tufe. I will do it, she said quietly. I will marry you. For the contract, for 90 days. He did not smile, not really. The relief on his face was subtle, almost solemn. Thank you. She shook her head. Do not thank me yet. Just make sure my mother's hospital account is paid before we sign anything. Already arranged, he said. nodding toward a folder on the bedside table. "You will find proof of payment inside." Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened the document. It was true, her mother's name, her account, the full amount cleared. A lump formed in her throat. Evan spoke again, softer this time. "You do not owe me anything beyond what we agreed. You are free when the contract ends." A few hours later, Mr. Lawson returned with the final papers. The marriage would be legal, filed quietly through the court clerk that same day. Clara signed first. Her signature looked strange, uneven. Evan signed next, his hand still weak but steady enough to make it real. When the attorney left, silence filled the room again. Evan leaned back against his pillows. "We should establish some boundaries. I do not want this to become confusing." Clara crossed her arms. "I agree. Say the rules." He recited them calmly, like he had been rehearsing them in his mind all night. Rule 1. This marriage is a formality. No expectations beyond appearances. Rule 2. We will live together at my residence only when required for public events. Rule 3. You will have complete privacy otherwise. Rule 4. If either of us wishes to end the agreement early, we do so in writing. She nodded slowly. And Rule 5. He looked directly at her. Do not fall in love. The bluntness of it made her laugh once, quietly. "That will not be a problem, Mr. Cole." His gaze softened, but he did not respond. By late afternoon, the hospital released him under private care. Clara followed him to a black sedan waiting at the entrance. The driver opened the door, and she hesitated. Only a moment before stepping inside. The city outside passed by in streaks of glass and rain. They stopped before a tall building overlooking the river. The sign above the gate read Cole Residence. Inside, the place felt more like a museum than a home. Marble floors, high ceilings, shelves of art that seemed untouched by time. Clara walked in slowly, her reflection shifting across the polished floor. "This place feels empty," she murmured. Evan glanced around. It has been for a long time. A housekeeper appeared briefly to show her to a guest room on the second floor. It was larger than her entire apartment. The walls were white, the bed linen crisp, a faint scent of lavender in the air. She stood by the window watching the rain as the reality settled in. Yesterday she had been a nurse struggling to pay rent. Today she was legally married to a man she barely knew. That evening, they sat across from each other in the dining room. The table was long enough for 10 people, but only 2 plates were set. Neither spoke much during the meal. Every clink of silverware echoed like a question neither dared to ask. Finally, Evan broke the silence. "You can relax. You do not have to pretend here. The cameras will not come until the weekend." "I am not pretending," she said, pushing the food around her plate. "I am just trying to understand how my life turned into this." "You agreed because you care," he said softly. "That is rare. Do not lose it." For a moment, the weight of his words filled the room. Then he stood, adjusting the cane he used for balance. "Good night, Mrs. Cole." Clara looked up, startled by the sound of her new name. "Good night, Mr. Cole." When he left, she sat there alone, the ticking of a wall clock echoing through the empty hall. She glanced down at the thin gold ring now circling her finger. It gleamed faintly in the dim light, too bright, too unreal. In that moment, Clara Hale, the nurse who had always believed in honesty, simplicity, and hard work, realized she had crossed into a world where love was a contract, and survival came signed in ink. And deep down, she feared that no rule, no promise, could stop her heart from breaking those lines one day. The following week unfolded like a strange dream. Every morning, Clara Hale woke to the soft hum of the city far below the penthouse windows and the sound of staff moving quietly through the halls. She was no longer Nurse Hale on the night shift. On paper, she was Mrs. Clara Cole, wife of the reclusive millionaire who had miraculously survived his own downfall. Evan Cole's recovery was slow but steady. The cane helped him move from room to room, and the color had returned to his face. Yet, even in his own home, he seemed like a man living behind glass, always composed, always distant. He spoke little, ate sparingly, and spent most of his time reading reports or making quiet phone calls in the study. Their conversations were brief, polite, and always professional. But one evening, that changed. It began with an email from the Foundation's event coordinator. There would be a charity gala in 2 weeks, Evan's first public appearance since the accident. His advisors wanted his wife to attend beside him. Clara stared at the message on the tablet, her stomach twisting. She was not made for red carpets or flashing cameras. She could handle emergencies and broken bones, not gowns and reporters. When she showed Evan the invitation, he glanced at it once and said calmly, "It is time people see that I am still standing." She crossed her arms. "You mean you are ready for the performance?" He looked up, meeting her gaze. "Yes. And you are my partner in that performance, remember?" That night, a stylist arrived with racks of evening gowns and jewelry cases that sparkled like stars. Clara stood awkwardly in front of the mirror, while the woman pinned fabric and muttered about colors that suited her skin. She barely recognized the reflection staring back, her hair swept into waves, her makeup soft but precise, her dress a deep shade of midnight blue. When Evan walked into the room, his steps were measured, the black suit perfectly tailored. For a moment, neither spoke. His eyes softened slightly as he looked at her. "You clean up well, Mrs. Cole," he said quietly. She gave a nervous laugh. "Do I look like I belong?" He hesitated before answering. "You look real. That is better." On the night of the gala, the city lights glittered against the water as their car pulled up to the Grand Hotel entrance. Cameras flashed instantly, voices shouting his name. Evan stepped out first, offered his arm, and Clara placed her hand gently over it. Her pulse raced beneath her calm expression. The ballroom shimmered with gold light and perfume. Every conversation seemed to pause when they entered. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "He actually brought his wife. She is a nurse, I heard. He must be desperate." Clara kept her chin high, smiling politely as Evan guided her from one introduction to the next. He was flawless, charming when necessary, silent when it mattered. But she could feel the tension under his calm, the weight of every watching eye. At the dinner table, a reporter approached, microphone in hand. "Mr. Cole, the world thought you were gone for good. And now, you are here with a new wife. Tell us, is this love or strategy?" Evan's hand froze on his glass. Clara saw the flash of irritation in his eyes before he smoothed it away. Without thinking, she spoke first. "It is both," she said clearly. "Love for what is worth fighting for, and strategy for surviving it." The reporter blinked, momentarily thrown off. Cameras clicked rapidly. Evan looked at her, almost startled, then gave a small nod. "Beautifully said, Mrs. Cole," he murmured under his breath. As the night went on, they danced once under the chandelier. It was slow and quiet, just enough to satisfy the photographers. Clara could feel the strength returning to his movements, the careful control behind every step. When the song ended, he leaned closer, his voice low. "You handled yourself perfectly tonight." She smiled faintly. "You did not faint, so I would say we are even." He chuckled softly, the first real laugh she had heard from him. For a brief moment, the world around them seemed to fade. No reporters, no contract, no lies. Just two people caught in the same fragile rhythm. Later, back at the penthouse, Clara slipped off her heels and exhaled. The silence wrapped around them like a blanket. Evan poured 2 glasses of water and handed her one. "You did more for me tonight than anyone has in months," he said. "Thank you." She met his eyes. "I only told the truth. You needed someone to believe in you, even if it was pretend." He looked at her for a long moment before saying quietly, "Sometimes pretend is the only thing that feels real." Clara did not answer. The words hung in the air between them, soft and dangerous. She turned toward the window, watching the lights of the city shimmer like reflections of everything they could never say. And for the first time, she realized that somewhere between duty and deception, something inside her heart had begun to change. The morning after the gala, the news spread like wildfire. Every major business outlet had splashed their photos across the front page. "Evan Cole returns with his mysterious wife." For the first time in months, the headlines were not about scandal or betrayal. They were about survival. Clara Hale scrolled through the articles, her coffee untouched. Her name was not mentioned, but the world was already whispering about her. A nurse, an outsider, a woman from nowhere. She tried to ignore it, but the words followed her like echoes in an empty hall. Evan appeared in the doorway of the kitchen, leaning on his cane. "You handled yourself better than half the executives I have ever worked with," he said, his voice warm. "You have no idea how much last night helped me." Clara looked up from the screen. "I only said what felt right." He smiled faintly. "That is what made it perfect." For a brief moment, silence settled comfortably between them. Then his phone buzzed. His expression hardened as he read the message. "The board has called for a private meeting tomorrow," he said. "They want to review my capacity. It means they are still trying to push me out." Clara frowned. "After everything you just proved?" Evan nodded. "They will not stop until they have it all. but I will not let them win. That afternoon they practiced. Mr. Lawson arrived with notes, rehearsing answers for potential questions. Clara sat beside Evan, helping him stay calm as the pressure built. She noticed how his hands trembled when he thought no one was watching, and how he would close his eyes for a second too long between sentences. When the lawyer left, Clara walked over and gently touched his shoulder. "You do not have to fight this alone," she said softly. Evan looked up, his expression tired but sincere. "You have already done more than enough." "I am your wife, remember," she said with a faint smile. "At least on paper. Let me be part of it." "Carl." He studied her for a moment, then nodded once. "Tomorrow, sit beside me. Just your presence makes them nervous." The next day, the meeting was held in a glass-walled conference room at the Cole Foundation headquarters. The board members sat in a perfect row of polished suits and practiced smiles. When Evan entered with Clara at his side, the room went silent. He took his seat, setting his cane beside the chair. Clara sat next to him, her posture straight, her gaze calm. She could feel the tension in every eye watching them. The chairman cleared his throat. "Mr. Cole, we are concerned about your recovery. The foundation needs stable leadership." Evan leaned forward. "You are not concerned about my recovery," he said evenly. "You are concerned about your control." One of the men sneered. "Your so-called wife has no business being here." Clara's voice was steady. "He has every right to have his partner present. Or is integrity something the board no longer values?" The man blinked, startled by her tone. Evan hid a small smile. The meeting dragged on for hours. They questioned his judgment, his plans, his memory. But Evan answered every point with precision. Whenever he faltered, Clara stepped in not with data, but with composure that silenced the room. When it finally ended, they walked out together into the corridor. Evan exhaled, leaning on the wall for support. "You were incredible," he said. "They did not expect you to fight." Clara smiled softly. "Neither did I." He looked at her then, really looked past the contract, past the rules, past the careful lines they had drawn. "Thank you, Clara," he said quietly. "You remind me why I started all of this in the first place." She met his gaze. "To win?" "No," he whispered. "To believe again." Lo! And as they stood there, the sound of rain began to fall against the windows, soft, steady, and somehow familiar, like the beginning of something neither of them could name. That night, the city outside the penthouse glowed beneath the rain. Inside, the air felt still, heavy with things left unsaid. Clara Hale sat by the window, watching droplets race down the glass while her mind replayed the meeting, how Evan Cole had stood firm, how the board had tried to break him, and how, somehow, they had faced it together. She turned when she heard the soft thud of footsteps. Evan stood a few feet away, no cane this time, just his steady breath. "I could not sleep," he said quietly. "Too much noise in my head." Clara smiled faintly. "You did well today. They will think twice before underestimating you again." He walked closer, stopping beside her chair. "I should thank you. You were the calm I needed." "You did not need me," she said, her eyes on the window. "You just needed to remember who you are." He was silent for a long moment before saying, "Maybe, but it was you who reminded me." When she finally looked at him, his expression had softened. There was no trace of the cold, calculated businessman, only the man she had cared for when he could barely move. "Evan," she whispered, "when this contract ends, what will happen to us?" He hesitated. "We end it. That was the rule. And if I do not want to?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. His breath caught. He took another step closer, his voice low. "Clara, do not say things you do not mean." "I mean them," she said, almost in a whisper. "I wish I did not, but I do." For a second, the world seemed to pause. The sound of rain softened, the city faded away, and only the two of them remained, two people who had promised not to feel but had broken that rule completely. Evan reached out slowly, his hand brushing against hers. "Then maybe," he said quietly, "some rules were never meant to last." And for the first time, he did not look like a broken millionaire, and she did not feel like a hired wife. They simply stood there, two hearts beginning to find their rhythm again beneath the sound of falling rain. The next morning, the world that had seemed calm the night before began to crack. Clara Hale arrived at the hospital early to check on her mother's treatment. As she walked through the lobby, whispers followed her. Two nurses stood by the elevator, glancing her way. One of them held up a tablet. The screen showed her face beside a headline that made her blood run cold. "Evan Cole's nurse wife exposed." a contract marriage for power. Her heart pounded as she scrolled through the article. It detailed private facts no reporter should have known: the dates, the contract, even the amount paid toward her mother's bills. It was all there, twisted into something ugly. By the time she reached the ward, her phone was already buzzing with messages. The hospital administration wanted a meeting. Her supervisor's face was pale. "Clara, they are saying you violated professional conduct. Until this clears up, you are suspended." The words struck like a blow. Suspended? But I did nothing wrong. "I know," the supervisor said softly, "but the board cannot risk the publicity. I am sorry." Clara walked out of the building in silence. Cameras flashed near the parking lot, voices shouting her name, demanding answers. She kept walking until she reached the street corner and leaned against a lamppost, trying to breathe. When she returned to the penthouse, the doorman avoided her eyes. Inside, the living room television was already showing the same story. Evan Cole stood near the window, his phone in his hand, his face a mask of fury. "Who did this?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Evan turned toward her, his eyes dark. "Nathan," he said, almost in a growl. "My brother leaked it. He wants to destroy both of us." Clara felt the strength drain from her legs. Then he succeeded. "Human Tran." Evan stepped closer, gripping her shoulders. "Listen to me. This is not over. I will fix it." Her voice broke. "How? The world already believes I am a liar who married for money." He looked at her, guilt shadowing his features. "Then, I will make them see the truth." But as she pulled away, tears in her eyes, Clara whispered, "Maybe it is too late." And for the first time since they had met, Evan Cole could not find a single word to stop her from walking out the door. For 3 days, Clara Hale disappeared from the penthouse. She turned off her phone and stayed in a small motel near the edge of the city, far from the noise and flashing headlines. Each morning, she bought a paper from the lobby, and every morning her name was still there. The world had already decided who she was. Meanwhile, Evan Cole was fighting his own battle. His office was filled with silence and tension. He had spent sleepless nights tracing the source of the leak, and when the truth surfaced, it confirmed what he had feared. His half-brother, Nathan Cole, had bribed a staff member to steal the confidential documents. The goal was clear ruin Evan's reputation for good, then seize control of the company. That evening, Evan called a press conference. The city's major networks crowded the hall. Cameras flashed as he walked to the podium without a cane, standing tall for the first time since the accident. "I have stayed silent long enough," he began, his voice calm but sharp. "It is true that my marriage began as a contract, but what is also true is that the woman I married gave me back my strength, my company, and my life. She did not deceive anyone. I did." The reporters fell silent. He continued, revealing the evidence: financial records, messages, and a hidden transfer that exposed Nathan's attempt to stage the entire scandal. "Greed nearly destroyed everything I built," Evan said, "but kindness rebuilt it." The next morning, the story had changed. The headlines no longer accused but apologized. Evan Cole's wife vindicated. Betrayal exposed within the Cole family. Clara read the news from her motel bed, disbelief filling her chest. When her phone rang, she hesitated before answering. Evan's voice came through, low and sincere. "It is over," he said. "Nathan has been arrested." "I meant what I said, Clara. You are free, but I do not want freedom from you." She was silent, tears slipping down her face. "Come home," he whispered. "Not because of a contract, because I finally know what love really means." For the first time in days, Clara smiled through her tears. The world might have judged them, but now, the truth had finally spoken for itself. A week later, the hospital garden was filled with the scent of fresh rain and jasmine. The same place where Clara Hale had once pushed a wheelchair now stood transformed with soft lights, white roses, and a small crowd of people who had come not for a press event, but for something far quieter. Evan Cole stood at the center of it all, wearing a simple navy suit. He looked healthier, stronger, no longer the man who had hidden behind walls of guilt and control. When Clara appeared at the garden entrance, the guests turned. She wore a pale blue dress, her hair loose, her eyes bright with both nerves and wonder. He walked toward her slowly. No cane this time, just a steady step and a smile that reached his eyes. "You came," he said softly. "I told myself I would not," she replied, her voice shaking. "But then I remembered what you said about love being the one thing worth fighting for." Evan reached into his pocket and pulled out the same simple gold ring she had once worn for the contract. The first time I gave you this, it was out of desperation, he said. This time, it is out of choice. Clara blinked back tears. And what if I choose differently? He smiled gently. Then I will thank you for teaching me what love looks like, and I will still let you go. To Auri, she took a breath, looked at the ring, then at him. I do not want to go, she whispered. A quiet cheer rippled through the small crowd as he slipped the ring onto her finger once more. There were no reporters, no cameras, just the soft hum of the evening air, and two hearts finally free to speak the truth. Later that night, they stood together on the rooftop terrace of the Cole Foundation building. Below them, the city lights shimmered like a sea of gold. Evan wrapped an arm around her shoulders. The board has approved the new grant, he said. We are naming it the Clara Fund for Nurses Who Keep Hope Alive. Clara smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. You really did not have to do that. Yes, I did, he replied. Because what you did for me was not about money or contracts. It was about healing. She looked out at the skyline, the reflection of the stars flickering in her eyes. Funny, she said softly. In trying to heal you, I think I healed myself too. Evan turned to her and kissed her forehead. Then I guess we both won. The city wind carried the sound of distant laughter as they stood together, no longer bound by paper or circumstance, but by something far stronger. For Clara Hale and Evan Cole, the contract had ended, but the story of love, trust, and redemption had only just begun.